Welcome to Supernatural History TV, where today we'll be talking about the true Grimm tales, Snow White. Who are the Brothers Grimm? The Grimm books were published between 1812 to 1815, focusing on keeping the folklore and traditions of old, usually passed down by oral tradition. The books were never intended to be children's stories. All the stories are to preserve the cultures of the past and the people who lived during that times of hardship. Further, the Grimm brothers sought out to uncover the past, traditions, mythology, and folklore that was slowly dying out due to the times. In the first edition of the book, there were 86 dark and scary tales. In one of the Grimm's tales, there tells the story of Snow White. The story starts with the setting of winter on a snowy day where the queen was working on embroidering a frame, where she accidentally pricks her finger and 3 drops of blood land in the snow. The queen saw the blood in the snow and saw how bright it was and wished for a child. She described the child as, and the queen spoke and wished, "Oh, that I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of the embroidered frame." Not long after, she was soon with child, who was white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. Soon after, in the story, the queen dies, and the king marries a new woman who is prideful and overbearing on her beauty. She could not stand to have someone to be more fair than her. This new queen also has a magical mirror and would speak the famous lines. "Looking glass upon the wall, who's the fairest of us all?" And the looking glass would say, "You are the fairest of them all." Over time, Snow White would become prettier than the queen. The queen goes to the mirror often to see who is the fairest, and this time, Snow White was fairer than her. The queen grew with envy and anger towards Snow White. With growing hatred to the young girl, the queen hired a huntsman to take her to the forest and kill her. The queen spoke and said, "Take the child out into the woods, so that I may set eyes on her no more. You must put her to death and bring me her heart for a token." As the huntsman was about to kill Snow White, she cried, begging for her life. He had pity for her due to her beauty and let her live. The huntsman would leave and come across a wild boar and killing it and taking the heart to the queen. The queen would salt and prepare the heart and would eat the heart, thinking the deed was done. The child would run in terror, being chased by the beast until she reached a small home with 7 little beds. She ate the porridge, she drank the wine, and fell asleep on the bed that fit her. At night, the dwarves would come home, noticing the house and food eaten, only to see little Snow White sleeping, and so they let her sleep. If Snow White would do the chores and clean, she could stay with the dwarves. However, the queen asked the mirror on the wall again, "Who is the fairest?" "Looking glass upon the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" And the glass answered, "Queen, thou art a beauty and rare, but Snow White living in Glen with the 7 little men is 1,000 times more fair." The queen, furious, dressed up as an old peddler woman and went across the mountain to the 7 dwarfs' home. Innocent Snow White let her in, and the old woman started to lace her faster and faster and took Snow White's breath away, and so Snow fell, dead. The queen left, and the dwarves went home and found Snow White on the ground looking dead. They quickly untied her. Little by little she came back to life. The dwarves said that the old woman was the wicked queen, and Snow White should be more aware of who she lets in. The queen, feeling accomplished by her deeds, asked the mirror once again, "Who is the fairest?" And the mirror answered, "Snow White is still 1,000 times more fair." The queen, realizing now that Snow White is alive, she grew angry. The queen decides that she will need to use witchcraft. She created a poison comb from the witchcraft and set off to the seven doors home once more. At the arrival of the queen, she knocked and asked for Snow White. Snow White told the old woman to leave, but the queen tempted Snow, saying, "Just look and see the comb," and the child opened the door. The old woman started to comb Snow White's hair, and the poison started to work fast, and the poor girl Snow fell. The queen, thinking she accomplished her mission, left, and the doors would come back, seeing Snow White poisoned, and saw the comb, took it out of her hair, and Snow White came to her senses, and was told never to let anyone in again. And again, the wicked queen asked the mirror if she was the fairest, and she was not, and that Snow White was still the fairest of them all. As the queen, now learning her attempt to stop Snow White failed, she promised to kill her. The queen went into a secret room and made a poisonous apple. The apple had two sides, one all white and the other red, full of poison. She went dressed as a peasant to the mountains and back to the home of the dwarves. Once again, the queen asked to meet Snow White and promised her that the apple was not poisonous, and promised to split the apple in half. The queen took the white side and Snow White took the red. Snow White bit into the apple and instantly fell over, dead, as the queen cheered, saying that the dwarves could not bring her back to life this time. The queen went back to the mirror and asked, "Who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror said, "The queen is the fairest." This finally gave her contempt, and her heart became calm. The dwarves came back and saw Snow White, and saw that she was poisoned, but could not help her. Grieved, the dwarves made a clear coffin of glass on all sides, and put her upon the mountain. They wrote a golden letter stating that she was the queen's daughter. Over a long time, a king's son came across the glass coffin. He sees Snow White and sees how fair she is, and asks the dwarves to take the coffin with him. The dwarves agreed, and the prince's servants carried the coffin away. As the prince and his servants were going back to the kingdom, the carrier stumbled on the path, and the shaking caused a piece of the apple to fly out of her mouth, and Snow White was awake. Snow White, just waking up, confused to what just happened, was met by this prince, who said, "You are near me," and relating all that had happened, he said, "I would rather have you than anything in the world. Come with me to my father's castle, and you shall be my bride." Snow White agreed, and there was a big wedding, but the wicked queen was also invited. The wicked queen, before she went to the wedding, asked the mirror, "Who is the fairest?" And the mirror answered and said, "The bride is the fairest of them all." The queen angrily questioned if she should go to the wedding, but did anyway. When she arrived, she saw Snow White and grew even angrier, but the prince and Snow White had something planned for her. The prince and Snow White had burning red hot iron shoes that were made for the wicked queen. The queen would dance in the hot shoes until she died. Now that we know about the story of Snow White, what are the historical contexts? One of the candidates was Margaret von Waldeck. She was a German countess in 1533. At the age of 16, she was forced by her stepmom to live in Brussels. There, Margaret fell in love with a prince from Spain named Philip II. Both parents, finding out about the relationship, opposed, and Margaret was mysteriously poisoned to death. For the dwarfs, some speculate it was the poor children that Margaret's father employed at a copper mine. For the poisonous apple, there was an old man in the area that would poison the children of the mine due to his belief the children were stealing his stuff. Another candidate was Maria Sophia. She was born in 1729 and a daughter to a landowner, Prince Philip, and his wife. After the death of his wife, Prince remarried to a Claudia Elizabeth, who disliked her stepkids. In their home, they had a mirror called a talking mirror. The dwarfs were linked to a mining town set among several mountains that had small tunnels where little men would wear bright hoods. The glass coffin was linked to the region's famous glassworks, and the poison was linked to a nightshade poison that was common in that area. Snow White in Christian tradition. In Snow White, the apple was poison, and that is very similar to the forbidden fruit of Adam and Eve, where Eve eats the forbidden fruit and was punished. However, in Snow White's case, she fell over and was close to death, but did not die. One could say the evil queen is being a deceiver and tempter, tempting the innocent to partake in the forbidden fruit. What else can you find that is supernatural in Snow White? Leave it in the comments below. And remember to like and subscribe and stay in tune for more supernatural history TV